Joining us now also, John, to talk about a whole bunch of stuff on the international front is former UN Ambassador John Bolton. Ambassador Bolton, first, let's get to this huge news that Iran has seized an oil tanker there in the Gulf of Oman. This comes, remember, the U.S. just recently said no more of these attacks by the Houthi rebels, by Hezbollah. We're telling everybody to clamp down. Well, they've stepped it up. Your reaction?
Well, exactly. I'm glad to be with you. Yeah, this is yet another demonstration, of which we have had all too many since the barbaric Hamas attack of October 7th, that nobody aligned with Iran and its terrorist surrogates is deterred by anything the United States does. What makes this even worse, in addition to the point that you correctly made, that we had just been very clear that this stuff had to stop, this ship had been seized by United States law enforcement authorities outside of Houston some months back for violating American sanctions on Iran selling oil, in this case to China. And it was under court order, under the supervision of the Department of Justice. Rather than just have it sit around in Galveston Harbor, it was allowed to leave and carry oil cargoes until its fate was ultimately resolved. But in effect, that ship belonged to the United States. And the Iranians knew that. And I think that's one reason they picked it out. Now, it's pure and simple international piracy, but against a government like the United States, it's not too extreme at all to say that's an act of war. So now we'll wait and see what the Biden administration does. This is, as they say in a technical diplomatic term, in your face by the Iranian government.
Yeah, Judge Weinberg.
Welcome back, Ambassador. Let me ask you this question. What are your thoughts about the fact that allegations were made against Israel for alleged genocide and they brought it before the World Court? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is it's really an insult to anybody who still believes in international law. But the significance of this case shows the propaganda forces aligned against Israel, brought by South Africa, whose apartheid government had been delegitimized by the United Nations by saying apartheid is racism, and racism means in the government means that it's illegitimate. A few years after that happened, the UN also said Zionism is a form of racism, which was intended to delegitimize the state of Israel. So, this really is a parody of what international law should be, even for its strongest supporters. And I don't know what the International Court of Justice will do, but I'm sure Israel will ignore it. And I think we should, too, since we don't recognize the jurisdiction of the court and haven't for many years because it's so illegitimate.
Ambassador John Bolton, this to me, as we're talking about all the anti-Semitism, this continues to shock me. It's a UN agency, UNRWA, and this is United Nations Relief Works Agency. And they are in charge of monitoring the UN, supposed to be fair to all sides. It turns out they were educating Palestinian children, some of the funds, and these teachers who were praising the Hamas attacks. We also heard a number of even UNRWA employees coming out right afterwards and saying, this is great news, what Hamas was doing. That is shocking. They are the UN.
Well, it's even worse than that. I will say one of the best things the Trump administration did in its Middle East policy was cutting off U.S. funding to UNRWA. People should know it's got about 40,000 employees. In theory, it's designed to provide assistance and protection for Palestinians. UNRWA has about 40,000 employees, of whom about 39,500 are Palestinians. So, in effect, it works very closely with the Palestinian Authority on the West Bank and Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and they work seamlessly together. So it doesn't surprise me at all. We keep finding examples of textbooks used to educate children in Gaza or the West Bank that are pure propaganda. And the U.S. and Europeans have funded this operation for years. It goes to the fundamental way, really, Palestinians have been mistreated by people whose real objective is eliminating Israel. they've become hereditary refugees. They're the only population since 1945, really, in the history of the world where refugee status has been deemed to be hereditary. It's not, and that's why Gaza has become a problem. Refugee doctrine is very simple. If you can't resettle a refugee back in their country of origin, you resettle them somewhere else so they can have a decent life. You don't leave them in a refugee camp any longer than you have to, and you certainly don't condemn their children to live in a refugee camp and their grandchildren to live in a refugee camp. UNRWA perpetuates this refugee myth as part of the idea that the refugees are the tip of the spear against Israel.
John, last question before we have to take a break. There was nobody to defend this tanker when it was taken?
As I understand it, and I think we still need more details, it was in international waters in the Indian Ocean. It was not, in the Gulf.
So it was not in the Red Sea. It was in the Indian Ocean.
Yes, exactly. It was in international waters, and that's why this attack by the government of Iran is at a minimum, it's piracy. And worse still, I think they knew it was basically a ward of the United States, and that's one reason why they went after it.
Wow, that really raises the stakes. Thank you very much. Ambassador John Bolton, we really appreciate it.